when we send our children off to be educated, the chances are very strong that that system is killing something in them from elementary school on. And I've seen this, of course, myself going through as a student once. I felt I had to pull back. I sat in a good many of my classes and read books that I thought had something lively to contribute to, my own self-culture. And I was fortunate. I think I did go through the educational system at a time when there were still lively and anomalous minds in the ranks of the teachers and faculty. But on top of what I got from them, I also conducted a very strenuous program of self-challenging. I wanted to bring my mind up to speed so that whatever the hell was going on in the 20th century, I'd be ready for it when I got there. It seems to me the system it's like being in a closed room that the oxygen is just gradually getting burned up in. There isn't the kind of fire, there isn't the kind of passion and focus and an intense sense of what the issues of existence are. Academic culture, which is something I've had to contend with for decades and decades, has seemed to me something so provincial and cloistered, and it's outrageous that so many academics still think of it as a kind of universal or comprehensive thing. It's a narrow way of existing and thinking and seeing things. The kinds of issues that are academically approved, the issues that can get published in journals, someone can set up a series of lecture topics on. These hardly correspond at all with what is going on out in the wide world of the actual culture, the popular culture. There should be more exchange, more flow back and forth among these different cultures, but I credit this to really a general pattern over the course of the 19th and 20th centuries. Mass institutions have evolved that have created their own little universe unto themselves. So you think of the Pentagon, you think of IBM, organized religion. Well, of course, schools and universities are another example of that. They've created their own little artificial envelope of culture. And the effect of this is it reinforces itself. It defines what is normal, what's rational, what's responsible, and so forth. Those institutions really haven't got a hell of a lot of tolerance for people who challenge the things that they take for granted as acceptable.
Why do you think this is, though?
Well,
should you lay the blame squarely on capitalism?
Capitalism is one dimension of...
Seems to me you don't want your consumers thinking too hard about what they're buying.
Of course, this has to... It is such a strong earmark of modern economic forms, and I really include communism as a special case. Both communism and capitalism are two different brands of economic modernism, and they require organized societies of a sort that wouldn't be possible if you had intelligent individuals.
Of course.
So the mass slavishness, which is an earmark of the culture in the most advanced nations, this is the easiest. I mean, so many forces flow together on this issue. This is the easiest kind of mentality to propagate by means of an educational system. It's the most advantageous kind for advertisers and politicians and so forth to manipulate.
Sheep.
Yes. We flatter ourselves for some strange reason that as moderns we imagine we're freer. I mean, we've abolished slavery. Well, we've changed its character. It's no longer legal. It's now political and moral. It's a cultural slavery. The individuals, most people believe they're free because they've never challenged it, they never tested it. The people who do test it find out just how little freedom there actually is.
Sure.
It's a kind of freedom that doesn't permit you to practice it, just to believe that you have it.
You don't have much freedom without much money in this country.
No, it is.
And not many people have very money.
That's right.
Very much.
Most people find themselves positioned in such a way, thanks to their jobs and the peculiar way they're plugged into the market. If they say something unpopular, they're taking a profound risk. And the people who can afford, I guess what I want to say is, it takes someone who has cultivated economically independent circumstances to have an independent mind. And that is becoming rarer and rarer. Most people are attached as satellites to some kind of an organization, and they're at risk from that. The privilege of speaking one's own mind, without which you can't get an education, and you can't learn how to see things, you can't learn how to think. I mean, if you're not free to say things that other people think are outrageous, if you're not free to violate the normality of what other people take for granted, you don't know what freedom is. That's what it is. It is it's the capacity to go contrary to the consensus. And of course, there's a price to be paid for that. But that price, for most people, is murderous as far as their welfare is concerned. And a different way to put the same issue is to say, in modern societies, in modern circumstances, I don't think most people value freedom enough to be willing to risk anything for it. So it winds up dying of disuse or atrophy or something.
Sure. All right, might also come back down to Plato's cave.
Yes, it is.
Idea.
That's right. It is so embarrassing. And the Greeks took a perspective on the slavishness of public opinion that is just unmistakably aristocratic contempt. What passes for thinking among most people does not deserve the name. It's called opinion rather than philosophy. And in its classical origins, philosophy separated itself off from the foolish conformism of most people's ways of thinking. If it hadn't been for that aristocratic contempt, we would never have had such a thing as philosophy created in the first place. We imagine today that philosophy can be turned into a much safer, domesticated, castrated kind of thing. It's safe to be a philosopher. Even academics can call themselves philosophers who have never taken a risk, who've never said anything, against the grain of what the public or the administration or whatever would care to hear. Our sense of culture is so feeble, we don't even understand what vital purpose is being served by that kind of risk-taking thinking. We think when somebody has been processed, when somebody has been shepherded through the educational system so that he can reliably be counted on to think more or less the way other people think, we call that an education.
Yeah.
Go figure.
So how close to the edge do you think we are, this modern culture, where we find ourselves in?
Well,
percentage-wise, you think there's a chance?
When I think of the life and death of civilizations, I put it in this kind of perspective. There are different time scales that different kinds of organisms are subject to. When you talk about the life of a human being, that is a biographical time scale. I mean, we know what that is. It's a lot longer than the lifespan of a fly, but it's a lot shorter than the lifespan of a society, which is itself shorter than a geological scale of existence. The same way in which it may take hours, days, weeks for an individual to die. Civilizations, in a sense, their mortality drags out for centuries. So I kind of resist the idea of a collapse. the end of the world, the break. When things happen cataclysmically to civilizations, they happen in terms of basic functions, organ systems within the larger organism that are not doing what they civilizationally ought to do any longer. I think it's fair to say the complaints that have been made against the educational system in this century are of that nature. We're saying, we're trying to get the idea across to our professional educators. The educational system is not doing what the founding fathers of the American Republic took it for granted needed to be done for the sake of an educated citizenry. It's just beyond a question. I mean, our picayune standards of how people are doing on the GRE or whatever, these very finite criteria are much too microscopic. The question is, are we producing competently challenged minds that can see the larger scale to the issues of things? And there's just no question our educators, for the most part, haven't got that kind and quality of understanding to give. So when students find a professor who is challenging and who has some of that more cosmic scale of understanding, that individual is one in hundreds, perhaps thousands. We're producing people who fit very well into some narrow niche or other. When the educational system works, we produce competent but finite specialists. And the problem is we should have learned over and over from the revolutionary quality of our technology, our politics, our economics. Adapting someone to fit into a niche is the most disastrous thing you can do for that individual. There are people who thought that the aerospace boom was just going to continue indefinitely. These days NASA is going to Congress with its hat in its hand and a tin cup. Nothing is forever. And an intelligent person should be someone who understands how to ride the rapids of existence. Everything that is foolishly or provincially taken for granted by any particular decade or generation, all that can change. It can turn around in a flash. So this raises the questions, well, where would we go to get this more protean or phoenix-like kind of intelligence? That is traditionally what the liberal arts and philosophy were expected to produce. But they themselves have turned into narrow specialties. The vicious impact of our organized educational culture on the humanities has been, they've been turned into one more academic specialty that no longer reaches back over the centuries and asks questions fit for a civilizational scale of understanding. When I started, interestingly enough, that's the first thing that I really kind of challenged myself with creatively in terms of my comics abilities. I put out a magazine, Phantasmagoria, based on the great ages of evolution. And what was happening there was, on the one hand, an interest in funny animal comics such as Pogo and Walt Kelly's work and so forth. On the other hand, Aesop's fables, and on the other hand, Hegel's philosophy of history. Right? It was such a natural confluence for me. I wanted to ask, how can we take the issues of the kinds of societies that precipitate out of different ages? How can we take an issue like that and turn it into something accessible to science fantasy, comics, and so on? And I still think that was it had great educational value for me, to try and think the thing through that way. I see comics in general not having risen to that challenge. I should qualify that.